up in a place no human should ever be. The sky had swallowed his world and thrown him into silence. For days no one came. The trees whispered. The rain never stopped. But something inside him refused to die. What happened next, no one could ever explain. It was Christmas Eve, 1971. The sky over the Amazon jungle glowed with golden clouds as Flight 508 carried 92 passengers toward the city of Pucallpa, Peru. Among them was a quiet 17-year-old boy named Daniel, traveling with his mother, excited to see his father after months apart. The air inside the plane was calm. Laughter, gift boxes, the hum of engines. Nobody suspected that, in less than an hour, the calm would shatter into horror. As the plane passed over dense jungle, lightning began to dance in the dark sky. The aircraft shook violently. Oxygen masks dropped. The cabin filled with screaming voices. Then, a blinding flash. A sound like the world splitting open. Daniel's seat tore loose from the cabin floor. For a moment, he was no longer in the plane, but falling, spinning, swallowed by clouds, wind howling in his ears. He could see nothing. Just flashes of white and green as the jungle rushed up to meet him. He thought of his mother's hand slipping away. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then darkness. When he opened his eyes, he was lying face down in the middle of the jungle. The air was thick with humidity. Birds screamed above him. His arm throbbed. One shoe was gone. He looked around in disbelief. The jungle stretched endlessly in every direction, and there was no sign of the plane. No wreckage. No other voices. He had survived the fall, but now he was alone, stranded in one of the deadliest places on Earth. When Daniel finally sat up, the world spun around him. His head pounded, his right arm hung limp, and dried blood covered his face. For a few minutes he didn't even know where he was. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the distant call of unseen birds. The air smelled of rain and decay. He tried to stand and collapsed. The ground was soft, soaked from last night's storm. His seatbelt was still wrapped around his legs. Slowly, painfully, he untangled himself and looked up. Above him, towering trees blotted out the sun. Vines hung like snakes and insects crawled over everything. There was no sign of smoke, no voices calling for help. Just silence. Thick, endless silence. He called for his mother. "Mom! Mom!" His voice echoed through the forest and vanished into nothing. He found small pieces of wreckage scattered nearby. A torn seat cushion, a piece of metal, a half-burned book. But no people. He realized with a cold shiver that the jungle had swallowed the rest of the plane. Hours passed as he searched. The sun moved slowly above the treetops. His legs shook from exhaustion, and hunger gnawed at his stomach. Then, a faint sound. Trickling water. He followed it, stumbling through roots and mud until he reached a narrow stream glinting in the sunlight. He remembered something his father, a biologist, once told him: "If you ever get lost in the jungle, follow the water. It will always lead you to people." So Daniel began to walk, barefoot, drenched, covered in mosquito bites, following the stream deeper into the unknown. By nightfall, he found a hollow under a tree root and curled up there, shaking from cold and fear. Lightning flashed in the distance again. Every sound, every branch breaking, felt like danger approaching. But as he looked up at the stars through the gaps in the leaves, he whispered to himself, "I survived the fall. I can survive this too." And in that moment, surrounded by death and darkness, something stronger than fear took root inside him: hope. Morning came with the sounds of the jungle, birds crying, insects humming, the distant growl of something unseen. Daniel's body ached everywhere. His ankle was swollen, and his head still throbbed from the fall. But he forced himself to move. Staying still meant dying here. He followed the stream as it twisted through the dense green labyrinth. Each step was agony. Roots cut into his feet, thorns tore his skin, and the sun above turned the air into steam. He drank straight from the water, not caring if it was clean. It was life. By midday, he came across a broken piece of luggage tangled in vines. Inside, a single candy bar, damp but edible. He broke it into tiny pieces, promising himself 1 bite per day. That candy would be his only food for almost a week. As he walked, the jungle grew louder, parrots screamed, monkeys jumped from trees, and somewhere nearby, a river thundered. He stopped often to rest, his breathing ragged. Once, he saw a small snake slither across his path, bright green and silent. He froze. He remembered the documentaries his parents once showed him. This kind of snake could kill in minutes. He stepped back slowly, heart pounding, until it disappeared into the leaves. Night came again. Daniel found shelter beneath fallen branches and covered himself with leaves. The jungle came alive, frogs croaking, insects buzzing, shadows moving. Every noise made him flinch. He barely slept, shivering in the humid darkness. Days passed. The stream grew wider, and Daniel began to notice changes. The plants were different, the water clearer. Sometimes he thought he heard voices, but when he called out, there was no reply. Only echoes. He started talking to himself, anything to fight the crushing loneliness. One afternoon, as rain poured down, he slipped on a rock and fell into the stream. The current dragged him for meters before he managed to grab a branch. When he pulled himself out, coughing and shaking, he realized how close he had come to disappearing forever. He looked at his reflection in the water, a pale, scratched, trembling boy, and whispered, "I won't die here. I can't." The jungle might have tried to break him, but his will refused to bend. He had survived the fall. Now he would survive the forest. The 4th day in the jungle felt endless. Daniel's body had become a map of pain. Bruises, cuts, and insect bites covered his skin. His swollen leg made every step torture. Yet he couldn't stop. The stream was his only guide, his only thread of hope that might lead to civilization. By now, his little piece of candy was gone. Hunger gnawed at him from the inside. He drank more water just to fill his stomach, sometimes lying flat beside the stream, too weak to stand. The jungle had changed, darker now, thicker. He could hear strange sounds at night, wings flapping close, heavy footsteps that vanished before he could look. Once, something brushed against his leg under the water. He froze, staring down into the muddy current, and saw nothing. But his heart refused to slow for minutes. On the 5th morning, he woke to a burning pain in his arm. Leeches, dozens of them, clinging silently. He screamed and tore them off, blood streaking his hands. For the first time since the crash, tears ran down his face. He wanted to give up, to close his eyes and let the forest take him. But then, he remembered his mother's voice from that last moment in the plain, calm, strong, whispering, "Stay alive, Daniel. No matter what happens." That memory hit him like a spark. He stood up again, limping forward, following the stream deeper into the unknown. Days blurred together. His skin was raw, his clothes torn. His shoes had fallen apart. Sometimes he would hear the roar of distant waterfalls, terrifying and beautiful. He tried to rest only when the pain forced him to. Then, one afternoon, he saw something that made his heart race. A wooden boat tied near the riverbank. It was small, weathered, and covered in moss. But it meant one thing: people. He shouted for help, his voice echoing through the trees. No one answered. He climbed up the muddy bank and found a small wooden hut hidden under vines. No one was there, just a fire pit filled with ashes, a few tools, and a path leading deeper into the jungle. He collapsed beside the hut, crying, half from joy, half from exhaustion. He wasn't safe yet, but for the first time, he wasn't alone anymore. When Daniel woke up beside the abandoned hut, the sun was already high. His lips were cracked, his throat burned, but for the first time since the crash, he felt something close to safety. Inside the hut, he found a small container of gasoline and some tools. He didn't know what to do with them, but the smell of civilization made his heart race. He tried shouting again. "Help! Is anyone there?" The sound disappeared into the jungle, swallowed by birds and the wind. He decided to wait. Maybe the people who owned this hut would return. Hours passed. The heat was unbearable. He drank water from the stream and tried to clean his wounds, but they stung horribly. Then, as the light began to fade, he heard it, footsteps. At first, he thought it was another animal. He pressed himself against the wall, terrified. But then he saw them, 3 men, barefoot, wearing simple clothes, holding machetes. Their eyes widened when they saw him, a bloodied, half-dead boy lying in their hut. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then one of the men stepped forward and said in broken English, "Who are you?" Daniel tried to answer, but only a whisper came out. "Plane, crash." The men exchanged shocked looks. They spoke rapidly in Spanish, then carefully helped him to his feet. One of them gave him water, another covered his shoulders with a blanket. They placed him in their canoe and started paddling down the river. The current was calm, the sky glowing red with sunset. Daniel looked at the men, strangers, and realized they were his first human connection after 11 days of silence. After hours of travel, they reached a small village, a few huts made of wood and palm leaves. The villagers gathered around, staring at the boy who had fallen from the sky. Someone brought an old radio, and one of the men began speaking into it, sending a message to the nearest town. Daniel could barely keep his eyes open. The last thing he remembered before fainting was the sound of the radio crackling and someone saying the words, "Survivor. Found." Daniel woke up in a hospital bed. Bright white light, clean sheets, the faint smell of medicine. It felt unreal. For a moment, he thought he was still dreaming. A nurse smiled at him gently. "You're safe now," she whispered. 11 days in the jungle, fighting rain, pain, hunger, and loneliness had finally come to an end. Doctors were astonished. His collarbone was broken, his leg wounded, and his body covered in insect bites. But his spirit, unbroken. News spread fast. The boy who fell from the sky and lived, screamed the headlines. Journalists rushed to the hospital to see him, amazed by the miracle. When authorities investigated the crash, they found the wreckage buried deep within the Amazon forest. More than 90 passengers had died, his mother among them. Daniel was the only survivor. Days later, he was flown back to the city. Cameras flashed, microphones surrounded him, but his eyes were lost somewhere far away, still seeing the green wilderness, still hearing the endless rain. In an interview, when a reporter asked how he survived, Daniel simply said, "I followed the sound of water," and never stopped walking. His words became a symbol of hope, determination, and the will to live. Years later, Daniel became a biologist, dedicating his life to studying rainforests, the very jungle that once tried to kill him. He said, "Nature tested me, but it also saved me." The story of Daniel's survival remains one of the most extraordinary miracles in modern history, a reminder that even when the world crashes around you, sometimes falling doesn't mean the end, it means a new beginning.
Thanks you for watch. Every old story holds a lesson worth remembering. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe for watch and listen more old times, real stories, and don't forget,